The first I knew about it, just rewinding, was well, I was writing a cello concerto for Julian Lloyd Webber, and the phone went, and it was Matt, our manager, and he said, "You better sit down." He said, "Paul Raven's died," and it took a good half an hour for it to sink in, and I had this commission to write this cello concerto, which I stopped right there and then, and I wrote a funeral oration for Raven starting at that moment, and I cried for 3 days just writing it, and then of course we all headed over to Switzerland, to Geneva, where the funeral was going to be held. Now I have to point this out. In 1983, the whole band moved to Geneva, and this was our kind of neutral ground. We have places in the world that if we need to go to ground, it's one phone call and we're there. And we have a house in Geneva where we all used to live, where we can often go to ground, and we've got places in South America, New Zealand, and we knew that Paul was wanting to go to ground. He'd given a distress signal already. And anyway, what's deeply comforting is that he made it back to Geneva, which is a deeply special place for a killing joke, where we all live together. And I know that I traced all Raven's last movements over the last 3 days before he passed. And he went to the house where we all lived, where I live now, in Geneva. And the bar, there was one cafe bar, this anarchist bar that Raven used to hang out in, and Joe Strummer as well, in Geneva. And he spent a lot of time there in the last 3 days before he died. And of course, he knew he was going to die 6 months before. This is what people aren't aware of. He knew almost to the day he was going to die. And I've collected all the SMSs and notes which he was uncharacteristically emotional, contacting everybody, telling them how much he loved them before he passed. And so he knew he was going. We'll come to that anyway. So as he died in just over the border, Geneva's like the border's 5 minutes there into France. He died just at the hotel he was staying at. It was just over the border, and he died there. So the funeral, with the actual cremation funeral, which is only half an hour long, was held there, and I turned up late there, and Big Paul was outside, and the whole crowd of people were outside. And with regards to the original lineup, nothing was ever spoken about that we're going to get together, but it was assumed. Everybody automatically assumed. And I believe the line that called us all together was a line from Of Death in Nietzsche's Also Sprach Zarathustra. And it went something to the effect of, when a great man dies, men put aside their differences and make solemn vows. And this line was read out at the funeral, the half-hour funeral at the cremation, which is a very distressing affair because all Raven's children were there, and especially the little ones seeing the coffin going in and everything. It was very distressing. So anyway, we all ran back to Geneva after this horrible cremation and went straight to Raven's anarchist bar, and where we felt a lot more at home. And everybody started drinking and smoking and everything else, and I became aware of everybody taking pictures of Big Paul and Geordie and myself, and wanting to get pictures of us together. And Raven had always said to me, "Jazz, if you get the chance of doing the original lineup, do it." So it felt like it was kind of, the whole thing was blessed by him. I felt his presence with me at this time. I felt him in the room, his presence in the room. I talked a lot about death with Raven. We used to have this phrase, he'd go, hurtling 1,000 miles an hour towards death, and together we'd both go, grinning as we go. You know, this is what we used to say. Because, like, death was always around the corner, and people were always passing, but I didn't kind of foresee the youngest of us going. But 6 months before Paul passed, he had a dream in which he saw all of his exes at his funeral. And then his girlfriend's sister had the same dream almost 3 days later. And Paul knows how to interpret dreams, and was no stranger to these sciences. And then confessed to one of his exes that he felt he was going to die soon. And now, prior to this, over the last 6 months, Raven could never lie flat on a bed because he'd get heart palpitations, you see. So he kind of knew that his ticker, his heart, was something was strange, because every time he lied flat, it would race. And so he used to sleep like sitting up all the time in the tour bus for the last maybe the last 8 years. I knew him. You'd see him in the morning with his coat pulled up like this. He'd never sleep in a bunk or in the bed. He'd go, "Get the kettle on, Coleman." And, you know, and that's how they found him when he passed, sitting upright in the chair, you know. And, oh man, I cried. It was harder than my own father passing. I'm still not completely over it. It's still, you know, he's still there very much for us. But one of the things I feel, apart from him making it back to Geneva, look, I can say this now because it doesn't matter anymore. Raves was on his second false passport, and they busted him here. And so he ran to South America, then headed to Geneva, right? And of course it was a different identity. So Paul Raven didn't exist in England anymore. Been taken off the computer. We couldn't take his body back home, huh?
Wow, interesting dilemma.
Yeah, so it was a very, very interesting sort of situation, but yeah, it was particularly hard, the passing. I realised that I spent more time with him than his own family and anybody else on planet Earth, and I stand by him. Raven was a gang member as well, and so I know that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome because his best mate had been shot through the head in front of him, and that happened this decade. So he had a lot of shaking up, and you know, we've always done a bit of marijuana in our time, but we've never done hard drugs. But Raven used to flirt with these things, and I don't suppose his heart took well to it, doing a ministry tour and the rest of it, you know. And there we are, really. There we are. But we're here now. And I don't really, you know, I say to anyone who's got any doubt about life after death to read Everett's theorem on parallel universes, or Schrodinger's cat, the dead and alive cat. So in the distant future, Raven's not even dead yet, you know, and so he's conscious now as we speak.